This was the digital recording studio class that's open to all of our students in the music school if they're BFA 3 or above. It's primarily music technology students, but we also have a lot of world music people who take this class, also people from our jazz program and the composition students. So what's really unique about this space is that it's sort of it's available to all of our music students. And so my goal is, before everyone graduates here, is that they have at least been through the process, either engineering a session or having been a part of a recording session, which is only going to benefit them if they get out in the real world to play. They will have that experience of being in the studio and even being, understanding what the engineer's thinking or something, even if they're the performers. It's called Digital Recording Studio. I think that's just because we've moved into the digital realm, and over here to the side is our old analog console. So, and sort of keeping up with how the industry's set up, it's important that they learn the industry standard tools. So we have Pro Tools in here. We have a Sony digital console, in addition to a nice Studer analog tape machine. We also have some older analog effects. So what we try to do is blend the two. Of course, we call it digital recording, and it's all in a digital format or media, but we also have older analog gear. So it's sort of a little bit of both. There's sort of a trend now where people are looking back at the older technology for certain sound characteristics while also looking forward and taking advantage of digital recording and all the benefits. Some are not all, and that's what's unique about this class, and what I really enjoy about it is that we have our music technology students who, of course, are really into it, and they know all the latest gear or the latest tricks and tips and things. And then we have newer students, like maybe a jazz major who, is interested in recording but maybe isn't as savvy with all the technology. So the challenge is blending those. And so I try to create an atmosphere in the class where the class becomes sort of a little mini community in a way where they're sort of exchanging ideas on their own. So if a jazz major is new to recording, then they can work with one of our music technology kids who's really, into it, and then they'll learn on their own. But in general, yeah, more and more we're seeing that in terms of our facilities here, that a number of our students have laptops that they come in with, and a lot of them, because of that, also this generation that's coming in, they're in general more computer savvy than we've had in the past, just because it's so prevalent in our culture in general. So
I had done a bunch of recording in my own little laptop studio before I came here. But this is a completely different beast, in all honesty. I mean, something that you can do much better work here than you can at home, is something I've learned, and I've had to unlearn a lot of stuff since I've got here. You have your own little mini studio, and you learn the little tips and tricks, and you learn the little things to make, the not so good recording that you're working with sound passable. And when you're in here, though, there's a whole different set of equipment to use. There's a whole different set of sort of rules that you can follow, and there's a whole different level of quality of recording that you can get here. So, I've just been, I've only been here a few months, and I've just sort of been trying to get in here as much as possible to get my hands on it. But the idea of recording was very familiar to me, but the actual practice of doing it in a studio, I found was a lot different from doing it at home, and that was sort of surprising to me. I think so. Because if you really want to get to sound how you imagine yourself sounding, you've got to know about recording, You can go into a studio and give it all over to the producer, and it may not come out how you want it. Now, then you get into a whole conflict, does the producer know what sounds better than you do? And is all this technical stuff best left to somebody whose job it is to handle it? But I think that everybody should at least have some exposure to it, just to be able to communicate with people on the same level, to use the same vocabulary, to, engage in the same discourse over the sound. So, yeah, it's definitely really valuable for everybody to learn.
That would be my focus on that too. It is just having been through that experience, where maybe taking a semester's worth of talking about listening to music, or so a lot of the jargon in here that we use. If you're familiar with that, or like what you like to hear, then it's easier to communicate that as you get out of CalArts and work in a studio. Like kind of what Caleb's saying is that you'll have that skill set there to at least have that dialogue, and then you kind of let the expert. But if you can say, hey, cut the highs on the drums, they're going to understand immediately what you're saying. Where if you're not clear what you're trying to get across, then it, would take longer to be successful at what you want to get.
That's great.
A lot of what I stress in this class is using microphone techniques and sort of microphone placement. I'm sort of a purist in terms of get it to sound good on input, get it to sound good as it is naturally. And then when you're mixing and listening, you don't have to rely on the tricks. And then you're using those tricks. The tricks are still there. It's always good. But what you're starting with, if you learn those techniques properly the first time through, then most of your recordings in general, I think, would be better quality to begin with. And then you don't have to rely on all the tips and tricks. But what's great is if you did mess something up, or maybe you just want to try something different by being in Pro Tools or on a digital, in a digital format on the computer, you can experiment too. So a lot of that, like what I feel like, if you learn the fundamentals of how to get something to sound good on its own, just through mic placement and that type of thing, and then when you go to mix, you have all of these things that you can try and work with, and also you can learn tricks to fix something if technically there's a mistake. So that's sort of my take. I did classical recording for like 6 summers, and it's all about sort of a purist approach, and that's kind of what I'm into now. There are a million different ways you could think about recording or that, but that's the sort of my philosophy and what I learned coming along. So
That's great.
I tend to lean that direction, more in the purist direction, seeing as I started out on analog, and I've done some analog recording. Before I got in here, I was a little anti-digital, to tell you the truth, just because, well, it becomes kind of like a music philosophy thing. You could talk about how a vinyl record sounds way better than a CD or something.
Does it?
That's in my opinion.
No, it does.
It does.
Yeah.
What makes it sound better?
yeah, but
It totally does.
okay.
What makes it sound better?
I think Caleb could probably answer that one.
Well, I mean, it's just it's the whole nature of analog versus digital. Okay. To touch on your first question for a second before I get into this whole
Cool.
vinyl versus CD debate. I come from the background of plugins. Throw them on top, but I think the philosophy that I was approaching that with was still the same. I used to be working, doing my best to spin straw into gold, and that's something that the plugins can help you do, but it's never really good. It's never like really how you want it. So it's like, it's sort of the old adage, like junk in, junk out, like if you start with bad sounds, like you can get them to a certain point, and I'm all for using whatever digital tricks you can to do the best with what you've got, It's like, if you're, guerrilla recording and you want to make it sound great, throw all the plugins you've got at it, There's nothing wrong with that. But if you can do it better, then do it better, So, people talk about, pitch correction and stuff like that, and people using it as shortcuts. Yeah, that's bad. But there's also a lot you can do with it. You can also use them as artistic tools, too. And, you can make the best out of the situation that you've got, too. And records are better than CDs. Because, well, I'm a DJ, so my belief in vinyl goes deep, The tactile nature of vinyl, the fact that you can actually touch it and manipulate it, is something I really like about vinyl. But, I mean, when you think about it, like, CDs are zeros and ones. And records are there's space between those zeros and ones on records that more accurately represents the sound that we hear. You know, the sound that we hear, and you can argue about, you know, wave theory versus particle theory or whatever it is. There are all these different theories about how sound travels, but it's widely agreed upon that it's a wave, you know, and that wave is not zeros and ones. You know, you can put as many zeros and ones into it, but it's not going to be an accurate representation of what it is. Then there's also just sort of the cool fact about it too.